Have you ever woken up one morning, opened your eyes to the quietness around you, and felt empty? Have you ever looked around your home, the chairs, the walls, the familiar pictures on the shelf, and asked yourself, what do I have left in this life? What remains when everything I've known, everything I've loved, seems to have slipped away? I have. There was a morning when I sat at the edge of my bed, staring out at the faint light of dawn seeping through the curtains. The air was still, almost heavy. The house creaked softly, sounds I used to find comforting. But that morning, they felt like echoes of something I could no longer hold onto. I walked slowly through the rooms, trailing my fingers along the furniture, the worn surfaces, the memories stitched into every corner. There were photos, frozen smiles from summers long past, children's drawings faded under the sun, a coffee cup still sitting in the kitchen as if waiting for a hand that would never reach for it again. I stood there for a long time, feeling the weight of silence. Not the peaceful kind of silence, but the kind that presses against your chest, whispering all the things you've lost. And in that moment, a question rose up inside me, quiet but insistent. What now? What am I supposed to do with all of this emptiness? How do you live when the life you knew is no longer there? It would have been easy to turn away from that question, to bury it under the distractions of the day, to pretend it didn't ache the way it did. But something inside me, a small, stubborn spark, refused to let go. And so here I am. Today, I want to share with you the journey I never thought I would have to walk. The journey of learning how to breathe again when the air feels too heavy. The journey of finding light when the world seems wrapped in shadows. The journey of remembering that even in the emptiest of places, something beautiful can still take root. Stay with me until the end of this video, because by the time we reach the last words, I promise you'll see. Even from the deepest emptiness, life can begin again. I wasn't always alone. For most of my life, I had what many would call a complete life. A home filled with laughter, the smell of coffee in the mornings, and the warmth of shared dinners in the evenings. I had a partner, a soulmate, who walked with me through all the seasons of life. Youth, the busyness of raising children, the quiet pride of seeing them grow and chase their own dreams. We had built a life together, piece by piece, moment by moment. Birthdays, anniversaries, Sunday afternoons spent tending to the garden, rainy days curled up with books and old records. It wasn't a perfect life. No life ever is, but it was ours. Full of the small, ordinary things that, looking back now, I realized were extraordinary all along. But life, as it always does, kept moving. The children grew up faster than I was ready for. One by one, they left home, off to college, to new cities, to new loves. At first, the house grew quieter, but it was the kind of quiet that carried a sense of accomplishment, of a job well done. My partner and I would sit on the porch in the evenings, sipping tea, sharing stories, laughing over memories that already felt like soft, worn quilts, comfortable and full of meaning. Then, one day, the rhythm changed. A diagnosis, the kind that drops into your life like a stone thrown into still water, rippling outwards until nothing is untouched. We fought. Oh, how we fought. Through doctor visits, sleepless nights, prayers whispered into the darkness. There were moments of hope, glimmers that maybe, just maybe, we would win. But not all battles are meant to be won. When I lost my partner, it was as if the world tilted off its axis. Suddenly, everything felt fragile. The routines we had built, making breakfast, checking the mail, watering the plants, became hollow echoes of a life that no longer existed. The bed felt too big, the mornings too quiet. At first, I thought I could fill the void by staying busy. There was always something to clean, something to fix, papers to sort, closets to organize. But no matter how much I tried, the loneliness seeped through the cracks. I had friends, of course, kind neighbors who would wave when they passed by, old friends who would call now and then. But there are some spaces in your heart that polite conversation cannot touch. There are griefs too deep for casual words. And so I found myself retreating, little by little, into the house, into myself. I told myself I was fine, that it was normal to feel this way, that eventually it would pass. But as the weeks stretched into months, a different kind of silence settled in, not just around me, but inside me. A numbness, a sense that life was happening somewhere else, to someone else, while I was stuck in a slow, gray dream. The photos on the walls began to blur in my memory. I stopped noticing the flowers blooming outside the window. Even food lost its taste, music lost its color. I remember one afternoon, sitting by the window as rain tapped against the glass, watching the drops race each other down the pane. I thought, is this it? Is this all that's left? It wasn't just sadness I felt. It was a profound disorientation, as if the map I had used to navigate my life had been torn apart, and now I was wandering without a compass, without a destination. Birthdays came and went. Holidays blurred into one another. The calendar on the wall, once filled with little notes and reminders, became an empty sheet, day after day crossed out without meaning. And yet, somewhere deep beneath all that sorrow, there was a tiny ember, a part of me that stubbornly refused to let the story end there. I didn't know it at the time. I couldn't see it then. But it was there, fragile, flickering, barely alive, waiting for the moment when I would be ready to notice it again. That ember would become my lifeline. It would become the first whisper that maybe, just maybe, life still had something left to offer me. Something simple, something small, something real. The days blurred together after that. Morning would come, but it brought no real difference from the night before. I would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of a house that had grown too large for just one person. The ticking of the clock, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant barking of a neighbor's dog. They were all reminders of life continuing on, out there beyond these walls, while I remained stuck. I found myself doing less and less. Breakfast turned into a cup of lukewarm coffee, often forgotten on the table. Laundry piled up. The garden wilted from neglect. Sometimes I would sit on the porch for hours, just watching the world pass by, cars, bicyclists, young couples laughing as they walked hand in hand. It felt like life was teasing me, showing me all the things I had lost, just beyond my reach. I started to wonder if it was even worth trying anymore. There were days I didn't even open the curtains. Days when the light itself felt too heavy, too demanding. Nights when I sat in the dark, wrapped in silence, letting memories replay over and over. Conversations unfinished, promises broken by time. I questioned everything. Was I being punished? Had I not been grateful enough? Was this the price of loving so deeply? The inevitable loneliness that waits at the end of every great story? Some nights, I would find myself scrolling endlessly on my phone looking for something, anything that could pull me out of the quicksand. Old photos, messages from long-forgotten friends, videos of people sharing their own stories. It was during one of those restless nights that I stumbled across a simple video. A stranger sitting by a fire, sharing their journey through grief. Their voice was calm, their eyes full of the kind of understanding only pain can teach. Something about it struck me. Maybe it was the realization that somewhere, halfway across the world, someone else was piecing their life back together too. Maybe it was the reminder that even in brokenness, there can still be beauty. That night, before I closed my phone, I hit subscribe on their channel. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel completely alone. If this story is resonating with you, even just a little, if you've ever sat in the dark wondering how to start again, I invite you to stay connected. Subscribe to this channel, leave a comment, even a small hello. Sometimes healing begins with the simplest acts of reaching out. The next morning, I did something different. I opened the curtains. The light was harsh at first, too bright after so many days of self-imposed darkness. But then I noticed how it painted the wooden floors in long golden stripes. I noticed the way the dust danced in the beams of sunlight, tiny particles moving with a rhythm of their own. It was such a small thing, barely worth mentioning, and yet it felt monumental. I told myself, just one small thing today, that's all. So I made my bed, a simple act, but it made the room look a little less abandoned, a little more lived in. The next day, I did another small thing. I watered the dying plants by the window. They looked pitiful, but there was a stubbornness in the way a few leaves still clung to life. I realized they hadn't given up on living. Why should I? Each day, I tried to find one small reason to move, to care, to breathe a little deeper. Some days, it was as tiny as standing outside for 5 minutes, feeling the sun warm my skin. Other days, it was daring to smile at a stranger at the grocery store. Healing didn't come all at once. It never does. It wasn't some grand revelation, some sweeping epiphany that made everything okay again. It was a slow, clumsy process of choosing to participate in life again, even when it hurt. Especially when it hurt. I started journaling, too. Not with eloquence or structure, just scribbled thoughts. Some days my pages were full of anger. Other days, grief. But buried between the lines, there were moments of unexpected gratitude. The rain smelled fresh today. Saw a child blow dandelion seeds into the wind. Made myself a good cup of tea. Tiny victories. If you're still here, listening to this part of my story, maybe there's a small part of you, too, that believes in tiny victories. I want you to know your presence here matters. Feel free to share your story in the comments, or simply write what small victory you celebrated today. I'd love to hear it. Together, we can remind each other that even in brokenness, we are not alone. In time, the weight on my chest didn't feel so crushing. The mornings grew a little easier. The evenings, a little less lonely. I reconnected with old friends, tentatively at first, afraid they wouldn't understand the new version of me. Quieter, slower, perhaps a little more fragile. But I learned that real friends don't need explanations. They sit with you in your silence. They laugh with you when you're ready. They see the light in you even when you cannot see it yourself. And slowly I began to see it too. The ember inside me, the one I thought had been extinguished, flickered stronger. I was still here, still breathing, still capable of living, even after losing so much. And in that realization, there was a kind of peace, not the peace that comes from everything being perfect, but the peace that comes from knowing that brokenness and beauty can coexist. As the days passed, I began to realize something important, that healing doesn't come in grand gestures. It's not in the huge moments we often expect, but in the quiet, ordinary acts that make up the fabric of our lives. So I began making those small, deliberate choices. I remember the first time I took a walk down the street without a particular purpose, just to feel the earth beneath my feet. I walked for a good 20 minutes, and I didn't worry about where I was going. I simply walked, letting my mind drift with the breeze. At first, it was uncomfortable. I felt self-conscious, like I was being watched. But the longer I walked, the easier it became. And you know what? That day, I didn't just walk. I felt like I was reconnecting with the world. I felt the sun on my skin, heard the rustling of leaves above me, and for the first time in weeks, I felt alive again. If you're walking through a tough season right now, know that you're not alone. Sometimes, even the smallest steps can begin to mend a heart. I also took up an old hobby of mine, gardening. I had always loved flowers, and once long ago, I would tend to a garden full of bright blooms. But over time, the garden had withered just like I had. Now, I knew it was time to try again. The first day, I dug into the soil with my bare hands, feeling the cool earth, knowing that it wasn't about perfection. I wasn't trying to recreate the garden I had once known. I simply wanted to nurture something, anything. I planted a few simple flowers, sunflowers, daisies, and lavender. And over the next few weeks, I watered them, checked on them daily, and watched them slowly begin to grow. Each bud that bloomed felt like a victory, a small reminder that life, even in the hardest moments, still finds a way to push through. That's when I realized we are not defined by the things we lose, but by the things we choose to keep alive. And sometimes those things are as simple as a sunflower or a cup of tea shared with a friend. Slowly, I began writing more in my journal. I no longer just recorded the sorrow or anger I felt. Now, I wrote about the small moments that touched my heart, like watching a child smile at me on the street, or hearing a bird sing in the morning light. Those small acts of beauty became my lifeline. if small joys have ever been your anchor too, maybe you'll find pieces of your own story reflected here. In time, the loneliness that once felt so overwhelming became something I learned to live with. It wasn't that it disappeared completely, but I began to understand it better. I started connecting with people again, little by little. A phone call with a friend, a visit from my neighbor, a shared smile with someone at the store. One of the most profound moments came when I was walking down the street and saw an elderly couple holding hands. They were probably in their 80s, but there was something so beautiful in the way they moved together, slow, steady, and completely at ease with each other. I felt a sense of hope stir within me. Maybe there's still time for me to learn how to love again, in new ways, perhaps, but love nonetheless. I began to find that peace I had longed for, not by trying to escape the grief or pretend it wasn't there, but by embracing it as part of my journey. I didn't try to rush through it anymore. Instead, I let the pain come when it needed to, and I allowed the joy to enter when it could. If my story has found an echo within you, I invite you to stay a while. Here, you're among kindred spirits. And the more I embraced the small things, the more I realized that the life I had left, the one I thought was empty, was full of meaning. I started giving myself permission to experience happiness, even in the smallest of ways. I remember the first time I laughed, really laughed, after my loss. It happened during a lunch with a friend. We were reminiscing about old times and silly stories, and for the first time in ages, I laughed so hard I cried. I didn't feel guilty for laughing. I didn't feel like I was betraying the memory of my loved ones. I simply felt like I was living once again. If you've ever felt like you were too far gone, too lost to come back, I want to remind you, it's never too late. If this story touched your heart, I'd love for you to be part of this community. Subscribe, share your journey, and remember, you are never truly alone. Healing may be messy, but it is possible. And together, step by step, we move forward. As time passed, I learned something fundamental, that life is not about avoiding the tough moments. It's about learning to live with them. It wasn't about running from grief, nor was it about pretending it didn't hurt anymore. Instead, it was about finding the space to be human, fully, messily, imperfectly human. And that's what I started doing. I stopped holding myself to impossible standards. I stopped trying to be the person I was before the loss. I accepted that who I was now, with all the scars, the pain, and the moments of joy, was enough. I was enough. And this, dear friends, is the grand lesson I want to share with you today. Happiness is not found in big, life-altering moments. It's found in the little things, the quiet moments that we so often overlook. I used to think happiness was something I had to chase, something I had to work for. But now I understand that it's always been there, quietly waiting, in every moment of stillness. When I started embracing the little things, my heart began to open again. I noticed the way the light streamed through the curtains in the morning, how it warmed the room. I noticed the sound of birds singing outside, their voices a reminder that life keeps moving forward. I noticed that even when I was alone, I wasn't truly lonely, because in every small moment, there was something to be grateful for. It's easy to get caught up in the big dreams and the aspirations we think will bring us fulfillment. I used to believe that I needed to go somewhere, achieve something, prove my worth to the world. But in my quiet, reflective days, I realized that the only approval I truly needed was my own. If you're finding your own moments of clarity in this story, I'd encourage you to leave a comment below. Share something small that brings you peace. Whether it's a cup of tea, a moment in nature, or even a memory from the past that still makes you smile. These small things are the threads that hold us together, and your story might just inspire someone else who is walking a similar path. I stopped racing, stopped trying to fill my days with endless activities or distractions, and in that space, I found peace. I began to savor the slow moments, the quiet mornings, the gentle evenings, and the moments of reflection that filled me with a quiet gratitude. It became clear that happiness was not something I needed to seek outside of myself. It was a state of being, one that existed in every heartbeat, every breath. It was about finding joy in the present, in the here and now. If you're feeling lost, like there's no way out of your pain, I want you to know it's okay. Take it slow and remember that you are not alone. Subscribe, interact, and let's continue this journey together. One step at a time. It's the small moments, the small steps that truly matter. And now, looking back, I see that everything I thought I had lost, I had not lost at all. The love I once shared with my family, the memories of happy days, the lessons learned through hardship, they are still with me. They live in my heart. They live in my soul. I am still here. I am still alive. And I am still learning how to love myself and the world around me. If you've made it this far in the story and it has touched your heart, I invite you to be a part of this community. Subscribe to this channel and join me as we share more stories of healing, of love, and of finding peace in the most unexpected places. Together, we can walk this path of life, not in a rush, but at our own pace, savoring every step.